The story of Iran is as old as civilization itself. To understand Iran is to understand a land where history breathes through the stones of Persepolis, where poetry rivals scripture, and where empires rose and fell like tides against a timeless shore. Known to the world in ancient times as Persia, this land has shaped and been shaped by some of the most powerful forces in history. It is a land of paradox, fierce resistance and spiritual devotion, conquest and creativity, kingship and mysticism. Our journey begins not with kings or warriors, but with the roots of civilization itself. The Elamites and the dawn of civilization. Long before Persia, there was Elam. Elam was one of the earliest civilizations in the world, flourishing in what is now southwestern Iran as early as 2700 BCE. Centered in the fertile lowlands of Khuzestan and the Zagros Mountains, Elam was not an isolated culture. It traded and warred with Mesopotamian powers like Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon. The city of Susa, Elam's ancient capital, would become one of the most continuously inhabited cities on Earth. Elamite writing, though undeciphered in full, reflects a complex society with rich religious traditions and royal dynasties. Elam played a crucial role in the transmission of art, governance, and urban life between Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau. The rise of the Aryans, sometime around 1500 BCE, waves of Indo-Iranian peoples, nomadic tribes known as Aryans, migrated into Iran from Central Asia. They brought with them their horses, chariots, and a spiritual belief system that would eventually give birth to Zoroastrianism. These Aryans settled in different regions, forming tribal confederations such as the Medes, Persians, and Parthians. Their arrival marked a turning point. They did not destroy the cultures they encountered, but rather built upon them. Their oral traditions, later recorded in texts like the Avesta, preserved epic tales and religious doctrines that shaped Iranian identity for millennia. The Medes, founders of a nation. By the 8th century BCE, the Medes had emerged as a dominant force in the Zagros region. They were one of the first Iranian groups to establish a centralized kingdom. In 612 BCE, the Medes allied with the Babylonians to conquer Nineveh, ending the Assyrian Empire. This victory marked the beginning of a powerful Median empire stretching across much of the Iranian plateau. Though the Medes left fewer monumental records than later dynasties, their influence was profound. They laid the groundwork for the cultural and administrative systems that would later be perfected by the Persians. The Achaemenid Empire, Persia Ascendant. The true rise of Persia began with a man named Cyrus the Great. Cyrus II of Persia, a descendant of the Achaemenid clan, overthrew the Median king Astyages around 550 BCE. What followed was one of the most astonishing conquests in history. In a single generation, Cyrus built an empire that stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus Valley. What set Cyrus apart wasn't just his military genius, but his sense of justice. When he conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, he famously freed the Jews from captivity and allowed them to return to Jerusalem. The Cyrus Cylinder, often regarded as the first declaration of human rights, records his enlightened policies. Cyrus established a model of governance that respected the cultures and religions of subject peoples. This principle of tolerance became a hallmark of the Achaemenid Empire, Darius the Great and the imperial machine. Cyrus's descendants continued his legacy, but it was Darius I, also known as Darius the Great, who truly systematized the empire. Coming to power in 522 BCE after a series of dynastic struggles, Darius reformed the empire's administrative structure, dividing it into satrapies, provinces governed by loyal officials. He built the royal road, established a standardized coinage, and introduced a postal system that made governance across vast distances possible. His palace at Persepolis became a symbol of imperial grandeur, a place where representatives from across the empire came to pay tribute. Darius also undertook military campaigns into Europe and India, though his attempts to conquer Greece met fierce resistance. The Persian Wars and the limits of power. In 490 BCE, Darius launched the first Persian invasion of Greece. His defeat at Marathon was a blow to imperial prestige, but it was his son, Xerxes I, who would mount the most famous invasion. In 480 BCE, Xerxes crossed the Hellespont with one of the largest armies the ancient world had seen. His victory at Thermopylae and subsequent burning of Athens seemed to fulfill imperial ambition. Yet it was not to last. The naval defeat at Salamis and the loss at Plataea in 479 BCE forced Xerxes to retreat. Though the Achaemenid Empire remained a superpower, the Persian Wars exposed its limitations. Greek city-states, though small, had shown that the empire was not invincible. The fall of the Achaemenids over time, the Achaemenid court grew decadent and corrupt. Internal revolts, court intrigue, and weaker rulers eroded the strength of the empire. In 334 BCE, a young Macedonian king named Alexander launched his invasion of Persia. In a series of brilliant campaigns, Alexander defeated Darius III and marched triumphantly through Asia Minor, Mesopotamia, and Persia itself. He entered Persepolis and, in an act both symbolic and tragic, burned the great palace to the ground. With the death of Darius III in 330 BCE, the Achaemenid Empire officially ended.
Persia, once the greatest empire in the world, had fallen to a foreign conqueror. But this was not the end of Iranian civilization. In many ways, it was only the beginning of a new chapter. Alexander's conquest and the Hellenistic legacy. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he didn't just defeat an empire, he absorbed it. Unlike many conquerors, Alexander admired Persian culture. He married a Persian noblewoman, adopted Persian court customs, and encouraged his Greek officers to do the same. After Alexander's untimely death, in 323 BCE, his empire fragmented. The eastern territories, including Persia, fell under the control of the Seleucid Empire, one of the Hellenistic kingdoms established by his generals. The Seleucid rule brought Greek language, art, and architecture into Persia. Cities like Seleucia and Antioch became centers of Hellenistic learning. Yet for all its cultural blending, the Seleucid Empire was foreign at heart, and never fully accepted by the Iranian population. Rebellions simmered, and local rulers sought autonomy. The rise of the Parthians. By the 3rd century BCE, a new force emerged from the northeast, the Parthians. Originally a nomadic tribe from the steppe, the Parthians, under the leadership of Arsaces I, declared independence from the Seleucids around 247 BCE. Over the next century, they expanded their territory westward, defeating the Seleucids and eventually claiming the Persian heartland. The Parthian Empire, also known as the Arsacid Empire, would last for nearly 5 centuries. Its capital, Ctesiphon, located near modern-day Baghdad, became one of the great cities of the ancient world. The Parthians revived many Persian traditions, while also adapting to their new position as a bridge between East and West. Their governance was decentralized, relying heavily on powerful noble families. They embraced Zoroastrianism and continued the royal lineage concept from the Achaemenids.
Rome and the Parthians, a clash of titans.
As the Parthians grew in strength, they came into direct conflict with another rising superpower, Rome. Beginning in the 1st century BCE, Rome launched several military campaigns into the Parthian East. In 53 BCE, the Roman general Crassus led an army into Parthian territory, only to be decisively defeated at the Battle of Carrhae. This humiliating loss marked one of the worst Roman military disasters and demonstrated Parthian military prowess, especially their horse archers and cataphracts. Parthia and Rome would fight numerous wars over the next 300 years. Control over Armenia, Mesopotamia, and trade routes fueled constant rivalry. Yet neither power could completely subdue the other. This prolonged balance helped preserve Persian autonomy and identity in the face of imperial aggression. The Silk Road and Persian prosperity. During the Parthian period, Persia became a crucial hub in the emerging Silk Road, the trade network connecting China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean. Silk, spices, gems, and artworks flowed westward, while glassware, metals, and ideas moved east. Persian cities along the route flourished. Zoroastrianism spread alongside Mithraism, and early Christian sects, creating a vibrant mosaic of spiritual life. Parthian merchants and diplomats also traveled far and wide. The fusion of Hellenistic, Iranian, and Central Asian influences during this era created a rich cultural milieu. Parthian art and architecture, with its domes and iwans, would later inspire Islamic and Persianate forms for centuries.
Decline of the Parthians and the rise of the Sassanids.
Despite their longevity, the Parthians faced growing internal strife. Noble families became too powerful, central authority weakened, and rebellions multiplied. In 224 CE, a Persian noble named Ardashir, from the province of Pars, modern Fars, defeated the last Parthian king, Artabanus IV, in battle. Ardashir proclaimed himself King of Kings and founded the Sassanid Empire. The rise of the Sassanids marked a nationalistic revival. For the first time since the Achaemenids, an Iranian dynasty controlled all of Persia, with a strong centralized government, religious orthodoxy, and imperial ambition. Sassanid glory, a Neo-Persian empire. The Sassanid Empire, 224 to 651 CE, is often considered the golden age of pre-Islamic Persia. Ardashir I and his successors restored order, rebuilt cities, and restructured the bureaucracy. Zoroastrianism became the state religion, with fire temples built across the empire. The Sassanids claimed descent from the Achaemenids, styling themselves as heirs to the ancient Persian legacy. Under Shapur I, the empire reached new heights. He defeated the Roman Emperor Valerian in battle and captured him, one of the few times a Roman emperor was taken alive. Sassanid engineers and architects built grand cities, palaces, and infrastructure that rivaled those of Rome and Byzantium. The eternal rivalry, Byzantium and Sassanid Persia. As Rome transitioned into the Byzantine Empire, a new stage of the ancient East-West rivalry began. From the 4th to 7th centuries, the Sassanids and Byzantines fought intermittent but brutal wars. The two superpowers vied for control of Armenia, Syria, and Mesopotamia. Battles were costly, and cities changed hands multiple times. Yet the Sassanids remained resilient. During the reign of Khosrow I, 531 to 579, the empire flourished intellectually and economically. Universities like the Academy of Gundishapur attracted scholars from Greece, India, and China, making Persia a center of learning. Khosrow II and the last flame of empire. Khosrow II, or Khosrow Parviz, ruled from 590 to 628 CE. His reign was marked by opulence, ambition, and war. After initial alliances and betrayals with Byzantium, he launched one of the most successful military campaigns in Persian history, capturing Jerusalem, Egypt, and even advancing into Asia Minor. For a brief moment, the Sassanid Empire reached its territorial zenith, but success was fleeting. Byzantine Emperor Heraclius counterattacked with devastating efficiency. Persian forces were routed, cities burned, and the empire thrown into chaos. Khosrow was overthrown and executed by his own son.
Decline and collapse.
Following Khosrow II's death, the Sassanid state unraveled. Civil wars, plague, famine, and economic collapse left Persia vulnerable. In 636 CE, a new force arrived from the Arabian desert, the Muslim Arabs. The Battle of Qadisiyah dealt a fatal blow to Sassanid power. In 651 CE, the last Sassanid emperor, Yazdegerd III, was assassinated while fleeing. With his death, the empire crumbled. Persia, once again, had fallen to an external force. But unlike Alexander's conquest, the Arab-Muslim invasion would reshape Persia's language, religion, and identity forever. The Arab conquest and the end of Zoroastrian Persia. The Arab conquest of Persia was not merely a military takeover. It was a profound cultural and spiritual transformation. Following the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE, the Rashidun Caliphate began expanding rapidly. In Persia, still reeling from the collapse of the Sassanid Empire, Arab armies encountered fragmented resistance. Key battles like Qadisiyah, 636, and Nahavand, 642, shattered Sassanid defenses. Major cities such as Ctesiphon and Persepolis fell, and by 651 CE, the empire was no more. While the initial conquest was violent, the Arab rulers soon allowed a degree of autonomy in exchange for tribute. Many Persians converted to Islam gradually, sometimes out of genuine belief, often due to social and economic pressures. Umayyad rule and Persian resistance. Under the Umayyad Caliphate, 661 to 750, Persia was integrated into a vast Islamic empire. Arabic became the language of administration. Non-Arab Muslims, Mawali, including Persians, were often treated as second-class citizens. The Zoroastrian clergy lost power, and fire temples fell into ruin. Yet Persian culture proved resilient. Local customs, art, and ideas subtly influenced the Islamic world, even as official policies favored Arab elites. Dissatisfaction among the Mawali contributed to growing unrest. Persian regions became hotbeds of revolutionary sentiment. Secret societies, Shia movements, and descendants of Sassanid nobility worked in the shadows to reclaim influence. The Abbasid Revolution, a Persian rebirth in Islam. In 750 CE, the Abbasid Caliphate overthrew the Umayyads with crucial support from Persian factions. The new capital was established in Baghdad, not far from Ctesiphon, signaling a shift toward the east. The Abbasid period marked a cultural renaissance. Persian administrators, scholars, and poets rose to prominence. The Barmakid family, of Buddhist Persian origin, served as powerful viziers. The Abbasid court adopted Persian ceremonial traditions, clothing, and architecture. The fusion of Islamic faith with Persian intellect birthed the Islamic Golden Age. This was not merely Arab civilization, it was an Islamic Persian civilization. The Islamic Golden Age and the Persian spirit. Between the 8th and 11th centuries, Persia became the intellectual heart of the Islamic world. Scholars like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, a Persian polymath, revolutionized medicine and philosophy. Al-Farabi, Omar Khayyam, al-Biruni, and others contributed to astronomy, mathematics, and literature. Persian cities like Nishapur, Ray, and Samarkand were thriving centers of learning. In literature, Persian re-emerged as a literary language. The Shahnameh, Book of Kings, written by Ferdowsi around 1010 CE, was a monumental epic that preserved pre-Islamic history and revived national identity. Written in pure Persian with minimal Arabic influence, it became the cornerstone of Persian culture. The rise of Persianate dynasties. By the 10th century, the Abbasid caliphs held religious authority but little real power. Regional dynasties arose, many of them Persian in origin. The Samanids, 819 to 999, based in Bukhara, were among the first post-Islamic Persian dynasties. They revived Persian language and arts, patronizing poets and scientists. The Buyids, 934–1062, a Shia dynasty from Daylem, took control of Baghdad and ruled as de facto kings. The Ghaznavids and Seljuks would later continue this Persianate tradition, blending Turkic military power with Iranian administrative genius. These dynasties created a political and cultural world where Islam and Persian heritage coexisted, sometimes uneasily, but productively. The Seljuks and the Persian bureaucracy. The Seljuks, a Turkic nomadic people, entered Persia in the 11th century and rapidly took control. Yet, like many before them, they were deeply influenced by Persian civilization. Though their rulers were Turkic, their courts, viziers, and administrators were almost entirely Persian. The Great Vizier Nizam al-Mulk, author of the Siyasatnama, Book of Government, established enduring systems of governance and education. The Seljuk period was a golden age for Sunni orthodoxy, but also for Persian art, literature, and architecture. The madrasas, Islamic schools, they founded trained generations of scholars across the Islamic world.
The Mongol invasion. Fire and rebirth.
In 1219, Genghis Khan's armies swept into Persia. The Mongol invasion was catastrophic. Entire cities were destroyed, populations massacred, and infrastructure annihilated. Nishapur, Herat, and Merv, once jewels of Persian civilization, became graveyards. Yet even this devastation could not erase Persian culture. Within a few generations, the Mongols themselves adopted Persian customs, converted to Islam, and rebuilt Persian cities. The Ilkhanate, 1256 to 1335, a Mongol successor state, patronized Persian scholars and architects. Under rulers like Ghazan Khan, the capital Tabriz became a center of art and learning once more. The Timurid revival. In the late 14th century, Timur, Tamerlane, carved out a vast empire from Central Asia to the Levant. Though his conquests were brutal, he was also a patron of Persian culture. His capital, Samarkand, was adorned with Persian architecture, gardens, and learning institutions. Persian became the language of the court, and Timurid rulers viewed themselves as heirs to both Genghis Khan and the great Shahs of old. The Timurid era was a bridge between medieval Persia and the modern world, a brief but brilliant flash of Persian cultural supremacy before the dawn of a new, religiously unified Persian empire. Prelude to the Safavids. By the late 15th century, Iran was fractured. Turkic warlords, tribal confederations, and Mongol remnants fought for power. Islam had become deeply rooted, yet split along Sunni and Shia lines. Persian identity, however, endured. It was during this time that a new movement began to rise in the mountains of Ardabil, a mystical Sufi order with militant ambitions. Its leader, Ismail, would proclaim himself Shah and change the course of Iranian history forever. The rise of the Safavid Empire. In 1501, a young warrior mystic named Ismail I declared himself Shah of Iran. He founded the Safavid dynasty and imposed Twelver Shia Islam as the state religion, a radical and defining transformation. This was no minor policy shift. The majority of Persians at the time were Sunni Muslims. Ismail's enforcement of Shi'ism was brutal and thorough. Religious scholars, ulama, were imported from Lebanon and Bahrain to train a new Shia clergy, while Sufi orders and Sunni practices were suppressed.
But the Safavids also restored Persian pride and independence. After centuries of foreign dynasties, Persia was again ruled by native kings. Ismail chose Tabriz as his capital and revived the image of the King of Kings from Achaemenid and Sassanid times. Shah Abbas the Great. Empire reforged. The Safavid Empire reached its zenith under Shah Abbas I, 1588 to 1629. A master strategist, Abbas reformed the army, centralized the government, and broke the power of unruly tribal lords. He relocated the capital to Isfahan, transforming it into a dazzling imperial city filled with mosques, palaces, bridges, and bazaars, all adorned with signature Persian tilework and calligraphy. Trade routes flourished. Armenians were resettled in New Julfa, forming merchant networks across Asia and Europe. Persia re-entered the global arena as a cultural and economic force. Under Abbas, Persian miniature painting, carpet weaving, and architecture reached exquisite heights. Diplomatically, he played European powers against the Ottomans and Mughals, navigating a turbulent geopolitical landscape. Decline of the Safavids and Afghan invasion. After Abbas's death, weak successors and court intrigue eroded central power. By the early 18th century, the Safavid state was paralyzed. In 1722, Afghan tribes under Mahmud Hotak invaded and captured Isfahan. The Safavid dynasty collapsed into chaos. While some members of the royal family continued to claim the throne, effective rule had ended. This foreign invasion shocked the Persian psyche. For the second time since the Arab conquest, Iran had fallen into foreign hands. But again, this would not be the end. Nader Shah, the Sword of Persia. Amid the post-Safavid anarchy rose a formidable general, Nader Shah Afshar. A military genius, Nader expelled the Afghans, defeated the Ottomans and Mughals, and even sacked Delhi, bringing back immense treasure, including the Peacock Throne and the Koh-i-Noor Diamond. Though a brilliant warrior, Nader was increasingly paranoid and cruel. His reign ended in assassination, but he remains a legendary figure in Iranian history, seen by some as a Napoleon-like figure who nearly rebuilt Persia's glory. The Zand and Qajar dynasties, caught between empires. Following Nader Shah's death, Iran fragmented. Eventually, Karim Khan Zand established a modest but stable state centered in Shiraz. He refused to call himself Shah, preferring Vakil al-Ra'aya, advocate of the people. His rule, 1751 to 1779, was remembered fondly for justice and rebuilding. By the early 19th century, the Qajar dynasty, 1789 to 1925, took control. They ruled from Tehran, which became the new capital. But Qajar Iran was weak, corrupt, and deeply entangled in global imperialism. Imperialism and the struggle for sovereignty. The 19th century brought profound challenges to Iranian sovereignty. Russia expanded southward, defeating Persia in the Russo-Persian Wars, 1804–13 and 1826–28, and annexing the Caucasus. Britain, from its base in India, competed for influence in what became known as the Great Game. Iran lost territory, signed humiliating treaties, and was forced to grant economic concessions to European powers. These capitulations gave foreigners control over customs, railways, and industries. Popular anger grew. Clerics, merchants, and intellectuals began calling for reform and resistance. The Constitutional Revolution, 1905 to 1911. One of the first major modern reform movements in the Middle East occurred in Iran, the Constitutional Revolution. Triggered by outrage over corruption, economic mismanagement, and foreign dominance, protesters demanded a constitution and parliament, Majlis. In 1906, the Qajar Shah reluctantly agreed, and Iran became a constitutional monarchy. The revolution was both inspired by and influential to movements in Russia, the Ottoman Empire, and beyond. Though conservative forces suppressed some of its gains, the idea of accountable government and national sovereignty took firm root. Reza Shah and the Pahlavi dynasty. In 1921, Reza Khan, a military officer, staged a coup and became Iran's de facto ruler. By 1925, he deposed the Qajar dynasty and founded the Pahlavi dynasty, crowning himself Reza Shah Pahlavi. Determined to modernize Iran, Reza Shah built roads, schools, factories, and a secular legal system. He banned the veil, limited clerical influence, and changed Persia's international name to Iran in 1935. But his rule was also authoritarian. Political opposition was crushed, and ethnic minorities were forcibly assimilated. During World War II, Britain and the Soviet Union occupied Iran, fearing Nazi influence. In 1941, Reza Shah was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Oil, Mossadegh, and foreign meddling. In the post-war years, Iran's oil industry became the center of political struggle. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh, a popular nationalist, became prime minister and nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, now BP, defying British control. In response, Britain and the U.S. orchestrated a coup, Operation Ajax, in 1953, ousting Mossadegh and restoring the Shah's full power. This event remains a deep scar in Iran's memory and fueled future anti-Western sentiment. The Shah ruled with increasing authoritarianism, backed by U.S. military and economic aid. Iran modernized rapidly, but at the cost of political freedom and rising inequality. The Islamic Revolution, 1979. By the late 1970s, discontent erupted. Massive protests spread across Iran. Islamists, secular nationalists, communists, and students united against the Shah's regime. Exiled cleric, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, became the symbolic and spiritual leader of the revolution. In 1979, the Shah fled. The monarchy collapsed. Khomeini returned and proclaimed the Islamic Republic of Iran, based on Vilayat-e-Faqih, the rule of the Islamic jurist. This revolution was unique, not just anti-colonial and anti-authoritarian, but deeply theocratic. It reversed centuries of secularization and shifted Iran's ideological core. The hostage crisis and global isolation. Later that year, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. The crisis shocked the world and severed U.S.-Iran relations. Sanctions followed. Iran became diplomatically isolated. Domestically, political purges eliminated opposition. Women's rights were sharply restricted. The Islamic dress code became mandatory. Revolutionary tribunals executed thousands. But the regime survived and even consolidated power amid chaos. The Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 1988. In 1980, Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein, fearing the spread of Iran's revolution, invaded Iran. What followed was an 8-year war, one of the bloodiest of the 20th century, with over 1 million casualties. Cities were bombed, chemical weapons used, and children sent into battle. Yet Iran held. Despite its isolation and suffering, the country never fell. The war became a defining moment, for the Islamic Republic's legitimacy and identity. Post-war reconstruction and internal conflict. After the war, Iran faced economic ruin. Khomeini died in 1989 and was succeeded by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei as supreme leader. Presidents like Rafsanjani and Khatami oversaw reconstruction and attempted modest reforms. Khatami's calls for dialogue among civilizations attracted global attention, but hardliners remained dominant. Internally, Iran became a complex society, a mix of rigid theocracy, educated youth, rich cultural life, and deep factionalism. The nuclear program and international sanctions. In the 2000s, Iran's nuclear program drew global concern. Western powers feared Tehran's atomic ambitions. Iran insisted it was peaceful. Under President Ahmadinejad, rhetoric escalated, sanctions intensified. The economy suffered, but the regime endured. In 2015, under President Rouhani, Iran signed the JCPOA nuclear deal with world powers, agreeing to limit enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief. Yet in 2018, the U.S. withdrew from the deal, reigniting tensions. Protest, repression, and the struggle for change. Recent years have seen waves of protest over economy, corruption, women's rights, and freedom. In 2022, the death of Mahsa Amini, a young woman arrested by Iran's morality police, sparked massive nationwide demonstrations. The regime cracked down harshly, but the protests marked a generational shift. Chants like "Woman, Life, Freedom" echoed across the world. Iran's youth remain defiant, while the clerical system holds power. Calls for reform or revolution grow louder.
The eternal flame of Iran. Iran's story is one of continuity and transformation. From the empires of Cyrus and Darius to the Islamic Republic, Iran has constantly redefined itself, absorbing, reshaping, and surviving every conquest, crisis, and revolution. It is a land of poetry and philosophy, of bazaars and barricades, of ancient ruins and satellite cities. Persia never died. It evolved. And its story, like the eternal fire of Zoroaster, still burns.